This is an order of battle listing the Japanese forces involved in the Battle of Buna, Gona from the 16th of November 1942 to the 22nd of January 1943. Details of the Japanese strength, reinforcements and casualties are reported from several sources. Japanese strength. The positions in the Buna-Gona area were manned by both Japanese naval and army units. The naval units included the 5th Special Landing Party, the equivalent of Marines. Forces withdrawing down the Kokoda track added to the strength of the original garrison. Many survivors of the Kokoda campaign congregated to the west near the mouth of the Kumusi River and linked up with Japanese reinforcements that were landed there in early December. Sources generally quote the Japanese effective strength at the start of the battle as 5,500 or 6,500 after reinforcement on the night of 18 November. Bullard gives a total strength deployed as approximately 11,000 troops. It suggests but does not unambiguously include forces landed as reinforcements around the Kumusi and Mambre rivers that did not actually reach the Buna-Gona garrison. Bryant gives the strength of the force as 10,000, however, this may have been derived from a planning figure and not an actual strength statement. McCarthy quotes Japanese sources giving the strength in the coastal area as 11,880. It is unclear whether this figure is the initial strength, the maximum strength, or the total strength deployed, but in light of Bullard's figure, it is likely the total strength deployed. Attributing this figure to the coastal area infers it includes forces landed as reinforcements around the Kumusi and Mambre rivers that did not actually join the garrison at the beachheads. Milner gives a total effective strength of 5,500 as of the 16th of November but notes, no precise figure can be given for Japanese strength at the beachhead in mid-November. This is based on the interrogation of Lieutenant General Heitazo Adachi at the end of the war. Adachi commanded the 18th Army, of which the Buna-Gona garrison was part. He gave the total strength as 9,000. Milner adjusted for troops Adachi included that were not actually located at the garrison and for approximately 1,800 who were hospitalized. In the effective strength, Milner has also included Army and Navy laborers. McCarthy also reports 1,800 hospitalized at the start of the battle. The Japanese hospital facilities were located in the vicinity of Sanananda. The 67th Line of Communications Hospital was located at Juruwa and another hospital at Cape Killerton. Bullard reports that some hospital patients were deployed in defense of Ghana. Watson and Rowe Fleisch report that in mid-November, a Japanese report fixes the enemy force ashore in the Buna area at some 9,000 men. Fitzsimmons also reports that there were 9,000 at the beachhead positions as the Allies approached. Sandler reports there were approximately 8,000 at Buna-Gona as the Allies were making the final advance toward the beachheads. Total strength figures will include construction units composed of non-combat troops and those that were hospitalized. Bullard and Milner report that hospitalized Japanese were integrated into the garrison's defenses. Condon, Rowell and Cowdery record that American troops were kept in the front lines and that, to evacuate all those with fever at Buna would have meant immediate victory for the enemy. Strength at key positions. The position at Buna to the Garua River was held by slightly more than 2,000 defenders, having been reinforced by the 229th Battalion, landed on the 18th of November. Milner gives the strength as being more than 2,500 troops. Edwards records the strength as 2,500. Sandler gives the force as 3,450. Gona was held by 800 to 900 defenders. Milner states that the initial strength of 800 had been reinforced by a further 100. In context, this appears to be at a shortly before the Australians made contact with the force garrisoned there. McCarthy records that the Japanese forces in front of Sanananda numbered about 5,500 including the hospitalized. No date is given, but in context of text, this might be mid-December. The Center of Military History publication states, enemy strength in the Sanananda area was therefore between 4,000 and 5,000. No date is given, but the context suggests this is at or after mid-December. Bullard reports a resupply from the Mambere River to supply approximately 5,000 men. No date is given, but the context suggests this is about the time that Buna fell, but before the 8th of January. It may likely have occurred at about the same time as the reinforcement that arrived just before the New Year. Milner records, General Yamagata had some 5,000 troops at the beachhead, but the men had almost nothing to eat and every Japanese in the area faced death by starvation. Buller gives the strength immediately prior to the fall as 4,000. This gives a detailed breakdown of the fate of the defenders. However, Buller gives the standing strength of the garrison at about the same time and on the same page as 5,000. McCarthy reports that the Sanananda Juruwa garrison was strengthened by 200 to 300 who escaped from Buna. Sources appear to treat the defenders on the Sanananda track as part of the defenses at Sanananda Juruwa, but this does not appear to be explicitly stated. Captured documents gave the strength holding the Sanananda track position as 1,688. McCarthy records that the Sanananda track defenses were manned by approximately 1,700. Milner reports the force as 1,800. Reinforcements. Macaulay indicates at least 1,200 troops landed from Rabaul on the night of the 18th of November. Macaulay also records a Japanese sources stating that 1,500 were landed to reinforce the Gona area at about this time. Bullard records that approximately 1,500 men were landed at the Buna anchorage over the nights of 17 and the 18th of November. Milner gives this as 1,000 landing on the night of the 17th of November. This reinforcement increased the effective strength to 6,500. Bullard records the landing at Base Bua of 800 reinforcements for the South Seas Force on the evening of the 21st of November. Macaulay makes reference to this landing but does not appear to indicate the strength of the force landed. Withdrawing Japanese, isolated by the Australian advance, had congregated near the mouth of the Kumusi River. Milner reports the strength gathered there as 900, under command of Colonel Yazawa. Milner records that, from this, a reinforcement of 500 reached Juruwa on the 29th of November. McCarthy reports that 400 to 500 reinforcements from this force reached Sanananda. Milner reports that, on the 2nd of December, barges unsuccessfully attempted to land 200 troops from the Kumusi River to reinforce Gona. The barges returned to Juruwa after the failed attempt. 4 further attempts by destroyer convoys were made to reinforce the beachheads with the 21st Independent Mixed Brigade from Rabaul. The brigade was commanded by Maj. Gen. Yamagata. Convoys on the 28th of November and the 9th of December were turned back by air attacks. A convoy on the 2nd of December, after an aborted attempt at Base Bua, landed about 500 troops, mainly the 170th Battalion, near the mouth of the Kumusi River. These troops joined with troops of the 41st Infantry Rec that Colonel Yazawa had been forced to leave behind. This force actively threatened the western flank of the Australians at Gona. On the 12th of December 800 troops, mainly of the I-170th Battalion, were landed near the mouth of the Mambe River, further along the coast. Part of this force was moved to reinforce the 170th BN operating against the flank at Gona. Between 700 to 800 reached Jiruwa between 27 and the 31st of December. McCarthy records that a reinforcement arrived from the 26th of December. The Center of Military History reports a detachment of the Yamagata Brigade, numbering less than 1,000, arrived during the first 2 weeks of December. It is also reported that 500 fresh troops were landed at Jiruwa on about the 12th of January. This does not appear to have been recorded in any of the other primary sources. The date appears quite inconsistent as plans were already being made for evacuation of the garrison by this time. Anderson reports, the enemy managed to put ashore during December about 1,300 fresh troops with supplies at several points west of Gona. These troops then made the way at night to Sanananda and Buna Mission. The Japanese relied heavily on motor barges for these movements, reconciling reported strengths. Milner's starting figure of 9,000 includes 900 that he had withdrawn down the Kumusi River and were under command of Colonel Yazawa west of Gona, and 900 troops landed from Rabaul on the 17th of November. Other sources report 1,500 were landed over the night of 17-18 November. This is 600 less than reported elsewhere. Milner does not appear to mention the arrival of the South Seas Force reinforcement on the 21st of November. The 21st Independent Mixed Brigade landed 1,300 troops near the Kumusi and Mambe rivers. This gives a figure for additional forces of 2,700. Added to the initial 9,000 reported by Milner, this gives a total deployed to the beachheads and west of Gona of 11,700. This is consistent with total deployed strengths of 11,000 to nearly 12,000. Of this figure, approximately 1,000 remained to the west of Gona and did not reach the beachheads. Figures for total strengths should also be considered in light of the strength reported at each position. Note is given to the variation in strength reported at each position. Based on the following strength reported of 900 at Gona, 2,500 at Buna and 5,500 at Sanananda, the apparent total strength would be 8,900. All of these figures are inclusive of reinforcements received on 17-18 November. The strength at Sanananda appears, from context, to be in mid-December. The strength at the beachheads at this time would not include any of the 1,300 from the 21st Independent Mixed Brigade that did not reinforce the positions until the end of December. About 500 of the force gathered by Colonel Yazawa remained west of Gona. Deducting these from the total strength deployed gives a strength deployed to the beachheads by in mid-December of 9,900. The South Seas Force reinforcement landed on the 21st of November totaled 800. While figures reported by the authors cited may appear inconsistent, it may be possible to ascribe some of this to a lack of precision or ambiguity as to what the reported figures represent in respect to time and where the figures reported do or do not include. Some variation may be the result of how the various authors have handled ranges or estimates in determining a figure that they report. Prisoners. Few prisoners were taken on any front. 50 prisoners were taken at Buna. More than 200 prisoners were taken at Sanananda Jiruwa. No figure could be identified for the number of prisoners taken at Gona. Milner reports that 350 prisoners were taken during the fighting in Papua, indicating this includes fighting along the Kokoda track. at Milne Bay and Goodenough Island. Evacuation. About 1,200 sick and wounded were evacuated by sea just prior to the fall of Sanananda. Milne reports about 2,000, including sick and wounded, were evacuated by sea in the closing stages or escaped overland. McCarthy reports about 1,000 escaped overland to the west of Gona, but Japanese sources suggest this may be as high as 1,900. Many Japanese attempted to escape by sea as each location fell. Number of Japanese killed. In accounting for the Japanese killed during the battle, a number of matters need to be noted. It is apparent that as the battle progressed, the Japanese were less inclined or less able to manage burial of their dead. At Gona, McCarthy reports that the Japanese had made no attempt to bury the dead, some of whom had been laying out for days. Milne reports that the stench was so bad that toward the end, the living had been driven to put on gas masks. In accounting for Japanese dead, the principal references make no apparent mention of consulting Japanese records or otherwise accounting for Japanese burials. McCarthy indicates that many dead may have been buried in collapsed bunkers and remained unaccounted for. Bombardment possibly obliterated traces of many others. Milne notes that there was a tendency of American units to double count Japanese dead, and where there was a joint responsibility between Australian and American units for recording Japanese dead, Australian figures should be preferred. At Gona, McCarthy records that 638 Japanese were buried. Milne records two conflicting totals, only 362 burials at one entry but 638 at another. Milne records that 1,400 Japanese were buried at Buna and that 2,537 were killed in the Australian area of operation, which includes Sanananda, Juruwa, Gona and the area around the Amberga River. Elsewhere, Milne refers to 1,993 having been buried, but the context is ambiguous as to who was responsible for these. Brigadier General Charles A. Willoughby was of the opinion that the count of enemy dead at Sanananda could not be considered a true count of effective enemy strength, since it included many sick and wounded who were killed. Milne also records that in the hospital area at Juruwa, only those too helpless to resist were taken prisoner. McCarthy recounts Australians at Gona encountering a Japanese post where at least 9 of the 12 manning it were streacher cases, but all opened fire on party with grenades and rifles. McCarthy reports a Japanese sources giving the number of dead as 8,000. Bullard reports the number of dead as 7,000. McCarthy attempts to reconcile the Japanese strength against the numbers buried, evacuated, escaped, or taken prisoner. He identifies a discrepancy of 3,200 unaccounted for. Of these, he says, a considerable number must have been dead on sea and land and uncounted. Milne concludes that, apparently, the Japanese buried the remainder. Japanese order of battle. Bullard reports the disposition of Japanese forces at the beachheads as at the 26th of November 1942 as follows. Buna commanded by Captain Yoshitatsu Yasuda, 229th Infantry Regiment, 3rd Battalion, 38th Mountain Artillery Regiment, 2nd Company, 47th Field Anti-Aircraft Artillery Battalion, 14th Pioneer Unit, 15th Pioneer Unit, 5th Yokosuka Special Landing Party Sanananda Soputa, commanded by Colonel Yusuke Yokoyama, Detachment 5th Sasebo SLP Southeast Sector Commander, Lieutenant Colonel Tsukamoto Hatsuo, 144th Infantry Regiment, Detachment 41st Infantry Regiment, Field Hospital Patients, Takasaga Volunteer Unit, Central Sector South Seas Force Headquarters, 55th Mountain Artillery Regiment, 1st Battalion, 15th Independent Engineer Regiment Main Strength 47th Field Anti-Aircraft Artillery Battalion Main Strength South Seas Force Medical Unit South Seas Force Field Hospital Line of Communication Hospital Mures Battalion Rear Sector Line of Communication Units South Seas Force Cavalry Units 41st Infantry Regiment Gona, commanded by Lieutenant Colonel Yoshinobu Tomita Gona Area 41st Infantry Regiment 1st Battalion Base Abua Sector, Tsukida Unit Nakamura Unit Mori Unit, Soda Unit Command, Major General Tomataro Hori, who had led the attack across the Kokoda Track, drowned at sea on the 19th of November after rafting down the Kumusi River during the withdrawal from Kokoda. Colonel Yusuke Yokoyama temporarily assumed command of the South Seas Force following Hori's death. Major General Kensaku Oda succeeded Hori to command of the South Seas Force. Major General Tsuyo Yamagata commanded the 21st Independent Mixed Brigade and was given command of all 18th Army units in the area other than the South Seas Force. He landed near the Kumusi River on the 2nd of December and reached Gona on the 6th of December. On this date, he was given overall command of the Japanese units engaged in the battle. Citations